going to introduce our speaker this evening, who I have a little knowledge of. I attended New Hampshire High School with his oldest son, Steve Antonacci, was a year behind me. Mr. Antonacci served as my Sunday school teacher at one point. It was catechism on Wednesday nights.
You were the guy.
Guilty as charged. Mr. Antonacci is I need the reader, retired dentist. He had his own practice for 55 years. He moved to Hampshire in 1970. He is a pilot. He trained at Midway Airport for his training. He's been married 60 years. Congratulations to you. Yeah. 6 children and 16 grandchildren.
Wow.
One other experience I had that was particularly memorable with Mr. Antonacci was, I'm interested to see how many people might remember this. Probably 20 years ago, at the end of Coon Creek Days on Sunday is a parade.
Yeah.
Starts at noon and ends at roughly 1 o'clock. And twice, on 2 separate occasions, he performed what's called a flyby. Well, the first time was with a warplane, and if you've seen or heard a warplane, it's like an automobile without exhaust and open headers. It's loud. They're amazing. They're impressive when you hear them. At the end of the parade, he flew it right down State Street over the crowd. It was impressive, and to see everyone's reaction, that's the thing I'll never forget. Everybody just everyone just whoa, just yelled, you know. And then a few years later, it was, I thought, some type of a jet. It was like a Learjet, right?
No, it was a military jet.
Military jet. Okay. That was impressive as well, especially the speed with which it went down State Street. Other than that, thank you for coming tonight. I give you Mr. Lou Antonacci.
You guys hear me? Everybody hear me?
Yes.
That might not be a good thing, but... All right, I was approached by Bonnie several months ago to give a talk about an organization I was involved with in the 70s here in town. And I said I wasn't too sure we could do that, and I talked to someone else who was involved with me. It had to do with land development and zoning changes. And I talked to one of the guys who was on the board with me 50 years ago. And he said, I don't know if that's a good idea. We got some privacy issues. So I called her door. I said, I don't know if we should talk about that. And she said, well, you fly. Maybe you can talk about it. You're flying. I said, yeah, but I didn't fly regular planes. I flew military planes, ex-military, fighter planes. And she says, from when? I said, World War II, and after that, some jets. She said, oh, people like World War II. You give us a talk on it. So here I am, talking about flying World War II planes, in case anybody's interested. I've given this talk to, a similar talk, to aviation groups and veterans groups. But they're people who flew. We have any flyers in here, pilots? We have there. Any other? You see, there's only 2 pilots here, and the rest of us are normal people. So I don't know how this is going to go over. But at any rate, you see the logo up here, the Warbirds of America. And after the war, we put a lot of our fighter planes and some of our bombers in storage. But by the late 50s, the government knew we weren't going to use these airplanes anymore, and so they started scrapping them. Well, there were pilots alive who fought in these things in the war and said, they're kind of historic machines. We should try and preserve them. So they formed this group, Warbirds of America. Any airplane that served in the military is called a warbird. And they formed this group to keep them flying, to show some knowledge and some educate people and help with restoring these airplanes. And it kind of grew. I was member number 300. I joined in the 60s, and now there's like 40,000 members of the group. So there's a lot of people who want to save these airplanes, and thank God for that, because I've utilized some of these people in maintaining my planes. Some of these guys had the experience to work on these airplanes, and what you need. But at any rate, I'll start out by saying that I was born 86 years ago in 1939. And that was kind of an interesting year for a couple of reasons. First of all, Hollywood released some powerhouse, big movies in '39 that have been popular and still resonate with people and are shown regularly. And they're the first ones, some of the first ones to be done in color. The Wizard of Oz was one. Gone with the Wind was another one. And then Stagecoach, which was John Wayne's first starring role, although that was a black and white movie. And that was just on TV not too long ago. So, anyway, it was an interesting year for that, and unfortunately it was also the year that Germany invaded Poland and gave the official start to World War II. And it was one of those deals where we weren't involved at first. After World War I, which was the war to end all wars, a lot of countries demilitarized, including America. But history has shown over thousands of years, whenever there is a country that is perceived to be weak by a neighbor, that neighbor is going to conquer that country. And it's just the way it is. It's happened all the time like that. And that's what happened in World War II. We weren't involved right away, but the Japanese thought we were weak, and so they attacked us 2 years later at Pearl Harbor, and there we are in a war again that we were not prepared for. Since then, our military has learned. We spend a lot of money on defense now to be strong. The stronger you are, the less chance you have of somebody attacking you. So people who complain about us spending too much money on defense don't understand. That's the reason to keep out of wars, because you spend a lot more money and costly in lives lost when you go to war. World War II was a cataclysmic event. The world had never seen before or after. There were something like 65 million people killed in that war throughout the world. 65 million people. Our country, we lost 500,000 guys killed in that war. Almost 500,000, 492,000. Now, you have to put that in perspective. America's population, when that war started in 1940, was 130 million people. Now, it's 390 million people, 3 times as many. So it's the same as if we went to war now and had 1.5 million guys killed. That was really bad back then. It was a terrible time for our country. And I don't remember much about the war itself. I have vague memories, but I certainly remember the end of the war in 1945 when I was 6 years old. The celebration that went on. The people were so happy that it was over with. We lost 500,000 guys and another 1.5 million wounded, casualties of various seriousness. And there were 16 million guys who were in the military. That's almost every military age guy in the country at the time. And another over 1 million women were joined the military as WACs, waves, whams, wasps. And of course, tens of thousands of women took the places of men in our shipyards and warehouses and farms. Everybody was involved in that war, and they were so happy when it was over. I remember we lived in Chicago, and when it came over the radio September 2nd, the Japanese finally signed the surrender. And the Germans had signed a couple of months before, so the war was for sure over. And it came over the radio, and people left work to celebrate. There was so much joy. Church bells were ringing, air raid sirens going off. My brothers and I went down to 63rd Street, main drag by our house on the south side of the city, and cars were streaming by on the road with people honking horns, waving, hanging out the windows, waving American flags. Music was coming from someplace. People were dancing in the street. It was a happy time, and it was a legal time. There was very, not like the celebrations. You win a Super Bowl now, and people celebrate and tear the town apart, break windows and loot stores. There was none of that back then. People were aware and careful about their neighbors' feelings, and they didn't do, the crime rate when I grew up was unbelievably low. We didn't have to worry about crime. It was something you didn't think about. The crime rate in Chicago, the murder rate was something like 30, 40 people a year killed, mostly mobsters and stuff like that, and or domestic disputes. Somebody killed their husband or wife or whatever. 30 or 40. Chicago kills that many people in a week now. It's unbelievable how bad it's gotten. When I got together with my friends growing up, we wondered, what the hell happened to this country? It's so immoral and so high a crime rate. You can't get on your computers nowadays without somebody trying to scam you out of something. There's thousands of these bumps that are online doing this kind of stuff. But at any rate, I want to make it clear from the beginning here that I was around when that war started, but I had nothing to do with starting it. But I remember the end of it. And the military at the time put on what they called air power displays at the major airports in our major cities. And they did that at Chicago's Municipal Airport, which at the time was, 63rd and Cicero, just a mile or two from our house. And it was, Municipal Airport was the world's busiest airport in the 30s, 40s, and 50s until O'Hare came along. And so they had an air power display at Midway Municipal Airport at the time. And our folks took me and my two brothers, one year younger and one a couple of years older. And we went, and I saw all these fighter planes in formation, peeling off, circling around and landing. And I'm telling you, my life was changed. I knew I was going to fly those things. And I'm sure a lot of kids thought the same thing. But I put myself in a position where I was able to do it. I just wanted to fly those airplanes. But life went on. My older brother got into cars, racing cars, overhauling engines, and I helped him. So I learned a little bit of mechanical techniques. And in high school, in '49, Oldsmobile and Cadillac came out with the first modern overhead valve V8 engines. Before that, all the engines were straight sixes or straight eight flathead simple engines. And we talked our dad into buying it. Those cars came out 135, 155 horsepower. Well, that's a 50% increase in horsepower. It's a big deal back then for us. So we talked our dad into buying an Oldsmobile instead of another Pontiac, which he was into. But my brother overhauled cars and worked like that. And high school was fun because the city of Chicago was laid out on a grid pattern. Every 4 blocks was a main street, 51st Street, 55th, 59th, 63rd, 62nd, and so far. That was north and south, and east and west was the same thing. You started at Racine, then Ashland, then Damon, and Western, California, every 4 blocks. And no matter where you lived in the city, you were within a 4-block area, because every one of those main streets had a streetcar line or a bus line. So you were always within 2 blocks, on average, 1 block from transportation. You get any place you wanted in the city, 10 cents. You got in a bus, you got a transfer, you get any place. So people didn't have cars. There weren't that many cars. Maybe half of the population had a car. And so the streets were clear. If they had a car, we put it in the garage. We could play baseball and football in the streets. It wasn't a problem. Of course, that's changed now. But at any rate, in the 50s, my buddies and I had fast cars. And so after everybody got home from work, hardly anybody was on the streets, or they might have been out shopping. The stores all closed at 8 o'clock, so everybody's home and we're the only people on the street, and so it was easy to drag race. You get your buddy going from one fast food joint to another. You spend your nights drag racing, stoplight to stoplight. Stoplight jags is what they were called. And so I spent my life in high school chasing girls, playing high school sports and drag racing, So it was fun. But in senior year, I had to get serious about how I was going to make enough income to fly fighter planes. So I took some aptitude tests. One the high school counselor gave, and then one I took at Loyola University in downtown campus behind Water Tower, Lewis Towers, their downtown campus. And University of Illinois, after the war, started a branch from Champaign up in Chicago. And they were at Navy Pier. They partitioned off the warehouses there and set up college campuses. And so they had college there until they built the Chicago Circle campus on the west side. And they abandoned Navy Pier. It became an amusement area, which it still is. But anyway, I took the aptitude test down there, and the results were interesting. My high school counselor I'm not saying anything bad about high school teachers now. But he gave us a reminder, called me in for my result, and he says, "Oh, you did great. You were in the tops in every category. You can be whatever you want." Well, great, except that didn't give me any direction. But University of Illinois and Loyola did. They sent home, they mailed you your results, your top 2 career choices that you were suited for. And I don't know if you ever take an aptitude test. You know, they ask you a couple of hundred questions that are so innocuous and nebulous, they don't mean anything. It seems like, how can they get anything out of this? You know, on a sunny day, would you rather read a book, go to a movie, take care of your flower garden? You know, we had to pick something out of that. Well, both of them, one of them, they gave your 2 best choices for your careers. One of them said aviation, first choice. Second choice was biological sciences. The other one, first choice was health sciences, second choice was aviation. They had me pegged. Those guys were good. So anyway, I decided, well, I like biology, I'll get into medicine. I applied for an entrance to Loyola University because I had my parents who were the type of person that says, you guys go, you stay in school, we'll pay for your tuition. Oh, fine, maybe we'll go to a good school, you know. So I applied for Loyola and was admitted to their medical and pre-med, pre-dent program. And when I was filling out well, medicine was 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, and 3 or 4 years of advanced studies to become a specialist of some kind. You know, 12 years. When you're 18 years old, 30-year-old guy is an old man. I didn't want to wait that long. But dentistry was only 3 years of undergrad, and it's 4 years of dental school. I could be out in 7 years. That was more appealing. But when I went, I knew what the requirements were to get into dental school. And so when I'm filling out my courses for my freshman year, I'm thinking, you know, I could get all these courses in 2 years. I'll take 21, 22 semester hours. I'll get all of this in 2 years. I'll cut another year off, you know. I'll be flying airplanes before you know it. Well, it wasn't that fast, but anyway, I took those courses. I was playing 21 semester hours, and my kids told me when they were going to school, you know, they don't allow us to take more than 18 because it's a high failure rate. And you only need 15 anyway to be a full-time student. And in 8 semesters, 15 years gives you 120 hours, which is what you need for a degree. So, but I did that because I wanted to get that 2 years. I had to fly sooner. So after 2 years, I had all the requirements. I took the entrance exam for dental school, and I got in. I'm on my way. I'll be flying before you know it. Not quite. I was working summer jobs all those years from high school on, and you can make a good living working factories, warehouses, Teamsters. I got a job doing that. You make $80, $90 a week, which was big money in those days. And I gave 70 of it to my mom. She put it in a bank account for us, and I would keep 10 for expenses, dates, and stuff. And I was working that summer at Central Steel and Wire in the summer of '59, a steel warehouse, supplying steel to the manufacturers in the city. And I was working with a guy who was older, and he was working only part-time. And I'm thinking, how are you working part-time? I'm working full-time here, I'm a student. And I found out that he's retired. He was a Navy chief. A chief in the Navy is equal to a sergeant in the Air Force, Army, and Marines. He was a Navy chief and started in the 30s when he was 18 years old, served all through World War II, Korea, 25 years in, and he resigned as a senior chief. And he took his pension. He was working part-time to supplement his pension. And so he said, "How about you?" I said, "I'm starting dental school." He says, "You know, the Navy's got a program for guys like you." I said, "Really?" And he started using his recruiting techniques on me. He said, "What's your classification, your selective service classification?" I says, "2S." He said, "Well, you know, 2S, you're active, you're liable to be drafted until you're 26. I'm going to be 24 again out of dental school." I'm thinking, that's not such a good idea. Of course, nobody heard of Vietnam and nobody heard of any kind of a war. It was a slight chance. But he said, still, the military knows when you guys get accepted to a medical school or a dental school, the school knows you're going to graduate, and the military knows that. So they'll make you an officer right now. And your date of rank starts right now. And when you get out, you go up a couple of ranks, you become well paid, and you get extra $200 a month for being a dentist or a physician. And you make good money. You get good experience. You'll have a lot of money. You can start your own practice when you get out. You can pay for it. And he says, you'll be serving your country. Well, all that sounded good to me because we had to register for the draft when we were 18 years old, and you got classified. Guys who were 1A got drafted pretty quickly. Some of my friends were 1A, but they joined the reserves. At the time, you could go active duty reserve 6 months and then be on inactive for a year and a half, and you can go to school and do whatever you want. And then, of course, if you're 4F, if you're nuts like Bill, you don't have to worry about it. But at any rate, I was 2S, and you had, in order to maintain your draft classification, you had to give your parole board, it wasn't a parole board, your draft board, your student grades so that you kept your 2S classification. And this was good because the military, they would like guys that they could draft later because then they'd have the education that would make their officer corps, you know. But at any rate, he convinced me, and I went down to the Navy, made an appointment on a Saturday, and took a written test, passed the physical, and an officer interviewed me, and he said, we'll let you know. 2 weeks later, they said, yep, you've been accepted. I'm down there swearing in. I'm a 20-year-old Navy officer. Wow. But at any rate, we went through schooling, and at the end of that freshman year, I started freshman year in 1959, and in 1960, I found one of my classmates. We had an anatomy lab. We were cutting up the bodies. I don't want to say that, but we had work in anatomy and on cadavers. And at the end of the year, it was every Wednesday and Friday at 3 until 5 o'clock at night. In the afternoon, we would have that lab working on the cadavers. And in the spring, I found out one of my classmates was taking flying lessons. Well, I wanted to go with this guy. You know, I wanted to be his friend. So he talked me into going with him. So I cut those classes. I was acing the course anyway. Didn't have to worry about it. And I started flying in a Piper Cub. 127th and Cicero, which is, the airport is gone now. It's a shopping mall, of course. But I started flying, but I didn't tell my parents because they were paying for my tuition. If they found out I was spending money frivolously on flying lessons, that might not have gone over too well. So I didn't say anything. I just kept flying every once or twice a week. And then the summer months, I would get another hour in and fly. And I was enjoying myself. I soloed after 8 hours. I had about 18 hours in when summer ended, and then school started again, dental school. And then from then on, it was year-round. Classes in the morning, patients in the afternoon. And there was no time for a job or flying anymore, so I had to give it up. But in the end of between junior and senior year, the military took us to their bases and taught us how to be real officers. Now, they were serious about this. So the Navy sent us to Newport, Rhode Island, big Navy base there. And they taught us how to march. They gave us a course in the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, so we had to learn about the legal laws because we may have to serve on court-martials, which I never did, of course. But I did get promoted to division officer once I was aboard, and I had to defend a couple of our guys for minor indiscretions that didn't reach the level of court-martial. We still had to defend these guys. So you learned a little bit about that. They taught us a course in firefighting, taught us a course in ship's damage control. It was interesting stuff. And most importantly, they gave us a course on triage, how to handle injuries in a mass casualty situation, which was interesting too. So then we started senior year, and in the spring of senior year, the Navy gave us our dream sheets. And if anybody who's in the military knows what a dream sheet is, that's where you put down your request for your next duty station. And if you think your request is going to be granted, you're dreaming. And that's why they call them dream sheets. But the Navy gave us 9 choices, 3 each in 3 categories. 3 continental U.S., 3 sea duty, and 3 overseas. So for 3 continental U.S., I put down 3 naval air stations. For sea duty, I put down 3 aircraft carriers. And for overseas, 3 more naval air stations. I wanted to be close to fighters. I got orders to an aircraft carrier, which is fine. We graduated, went to our finals, graduation, had a string of graduation parties, and then had to take my licensing exam to become a licensed dentist, and then reported to my ship. And spent 2 years at sea, and it was interesting. We lost guys, unfortunately, because by then the Vietnam War had heated up, and it was not a good time, but I lost my roommate. He never came back from Vietnam. Nice guy, great American. But at any rate, I started thinking about getting serious about marriage at that time, because I didn't want to get out, have to get married, start a practice. I figured I'd get the marriage thing out of the way first. And I had been going with a lot of girls, and as a matter of fact, flying back and forth, whenever the ship got into port, if you went in uniform, you could fly half fare on any airline. And airlines were so different back then. You could walk up to the counter, buy a ticket, and walk on a damn airplane. There was none of this stuff, you know, hardly anybody was flying for one thing. It was so nice. You could fly easy back and forth to the ship. And of course, you had to wear the uniform, which is kind of a downer, especially in the summer. You're wearing whites. You got to make sure you don't get anything dirty. But on the plus side, that uniform was a chick magnet. The stewardesses on those flights, they had half filled, maybe. The holidays were a little busier. But I was on 727, they had 125 seats. There were 12 of us on board. And flying back and forth was so simple back in those days. And the girls would come and sit down and talk. I had nothing else to do. And get phone numbers. Well, anyway, in '64, I was getting serious, and I always didn't date. I learned in high school, girls took relationships a lot more seriously than guys did, especially this guy, because I had long-range plans and I didn't want to be tied down, so I would not date one girl for a long period of time. I didn't want anybody thinking this was going to be real. And of course, some of them realized what was going on and they dumped me. I'm sorry, I can't see you anymore, I got engaged or whatever. So, okay, fine, move to the next girl. But at any rate, this one, you know, I kept her, and she didn't dump me. It was a cute little redhead. And I was home for a quick weekend. The ship was in port in April of '64. And I took out this one stewardess the night before on a Friday. I would fly in on Friday, date a girl Friday, Saturday night, and then Sunday go back to O'Hare, get back on the ship. And I dated her Saturday, and we wound up after the date at Marquette Park, near her home. And Marquette Park had a lagoon at the time, and we used to kid about going to watch the lagoon, the submarine races in the lagoon. It's been filled in now, it's a golf course. But anyway, we're standing there watching submarine races, and she's been talking. And she's telling me that she's going out with a girlfriend. She was 20 years old. She was a student at Loyola, but she was at the other campus. I was at the Lakeshore campus. And she quit later on. I found out she quit. She was modeling and making good money. After we were married, I found this out. I says, you should go back into modeling. He says, I would, except I'm always pregnant. But at any rate, she told me her and her girlfriends are going on another trip. The year before, they went to Jamaica, and the year before that, when she was 18, they went to Florida. And now she's talking about going to Hawaii, and I'm thinking, man, that's going to cost a lot of money. I could use that money. I said, wouldn't you rather spend that on a honeymoon? And she said, sure. And that was it. We were getting married. I said, I'll take you tomorrow. We'll look for a diamond ring. I said, okay, Sunday before I had to go back to the airport. So we go to a couple of jewelry stores, and one of them, the clerk, was a girl I had dated not too long ago. But she didn't see what you like, and my dad says, you know, I got a jeweler friend. I can get her a better deal, you know. So I said, okay, my dad will call you. I head back to the ship. And he took her out, his friend got a nice diamond ring and a matching wedding band and a wedding band for me, and he paid him and I paid my dad. And so we're all set. I said, we'll do it we'll get married in October. Because I knew the ship's movement. every quarter, they tell you the following quarter's movement for the ship. So you always knew 3 to 6 months in advance where the ship was going to be and when you'd be in. And I knew we were going to be in October. And that was her birthday. I figured, go, we'll get married on her birthday. I'll buy one gift every year, anniversary and birthday. Yeah, you all laughed. Did you know that? Anyway, what happened was the Vietnam War heated up. We were out for 4 months, and Lyndon Johnson thought we should build up our forces. He extended all leaves 90 days. I wasn't getting out, so I didn't have to worry about that. But I did have leaves. He extended all separations for 90 days, and he canceled all leaves for 90 days. Well, that was the wedding date, and I couldn't get off of the ship. And of course, there's no cell phones. I couldn't call my wife, my Arlene, and tell her. But she knew, because it was all over the news. This big war thing is building up, and all leaves were canceled, and so I got... she said, "What? I got to cancel." She was making wedding preparations already. She had the hall, the band, all that. And I says, "You're going to have to cancel. I'm not going to be home in October." She said, "Well, when should I make it for?" I says, "Well, we normally are about deployed for 5-6 months the most." And I says, "Christmas is going to be 9 months. They can't keep us out that long. I mean, that's unheard of." So I says, "Make it for Christmas. I'll buy one gift, Christmas." That didn't work either. But anyway, she made it for the Saturday before Christmas, and I got my leave set, and the ship came in, flew into port, and I flew home, and my buddies and my brothers were standing up for me when they had their tuxedos all playing. I went to the tux place, and they hustled me along because of the war, and I got my tuxedo on that Friday, and Friday night we went out for a stag party, which was a lot of fun, but good thing the wedding the next day was noon. So we had a chance to sleep in. We got married at noon, and of course I told her, when I first talked about marriage, my roommate, the Marine, he had spent time at 29 Palms, California, which is a Marine base out there near Palm Springs, and he said, "You should go to Palm Springs sometime. That place is beautiful." So I told her I'd take her to Palm Springs for her honeymoon. Well, I got home, I was lucky. I got a couple of days off. We went to a Wagon Wheel Lodge. Remember the Wagon Wheel Lodge?
Yeah.
By Rock?
Yeah.
We made reservations there. We spent a couple of days there because they had an indoor pool, bowling alley, skeet shooting, horse riding. It was a nice place. It's closed now. But so we went there a couple of days, came back, spent Christmas with the family, a couple of days, and back to the ship and out to sea again. But then I knew I was going to get out in 6 months in June that year. So I started looking for a practice to buy. I'm already married, I got that behind me. And I did find a practice in March in the south suburbs by our home. Bought the practice, and I got out in June and started setting up the practice, started with the family, built a home out there, and everything was settled. By 68, I says, okay, I got to get back into flying. Now, by 68, the airlines had departed from Midway and had gone up to O'Hare. And so Midway became a nice general aviation airport. A couple of charter operations there, new plane dealers and maintenance people, and a flight school. And so I started flying out of Midway Airport, got my private license. And then I knew if I was going to fly fighters, I had to be better. And I went on for my commercial license. Took extra lessons, the extra air work that had to be done, the instrument flying that had to be done, and had to move up to a different airplane because you can't take the commercial pilot's license in a trainer. You had to have a small passenger airplane. So I moved across the field to an abandoned American airline hangar, which had a flying club in there. They had their 7 or 8 planes, and there was a couple of charter outfits had their planes. And so I moved there and moved up, different kind of an airplane, a little more powerful plane with retractable gear and all this stuff, and took me up to lessons. And took a ground school course, passed the test, and now I'm ready to do my flying for a commercial license. I called the FAA, and the guy come out. They sent out this middle-aged guy, and he gives me an oral exam, and I had to set up a flight and go to all the weather briefing and planning the flight from Chicago Midway to St. Louis Lambert Field. And so I did all that, and I filed the flight plan. We go out to the airplane, which I had reserved for a couple of hours, and pre-flight the plane, and he's watching me. And we get in the plane and take off and do the thing. We get halfway, well, not halfway, 80, 90 miles out, and he sees I'm making all my checkpoints and making all the wind corrections. And he says, call ATC and cancel the flight plan. Okay, fine. I call them and cancel it, and he says, land at this airport, and we did certain landing, short field, soft field landings. Remember that stuff, having to do that, crossing in landings and all that. He says, okay, we'll go back up 8,000 feet and do some, no, first we did S-turns across a road at certain altitude, certain turns. You can't jostle the passengers, you have to make standard rate turns. And always be over the road at the certain heading, certain altitude. And then after that, we went and did on pylon 8s. You get a country road intersection, and you make a pattern of 8 around, compensating for the winds aloft, so you're always at the crossroad at a certain altitude, at a certain heading. And we did that all right. I'm thinking I'm doing okay. And he says, oh, you climb up to 8,000 feet, which I did, and he puts me under the hood. You guys still use hoods? Yeah, it puts me under the hood where you got plastic going forward and off to the side, and you can't see anything except the instruments, the 6 basic flight instruments. And he tells me, gives me headings and turns and climb to such and such a heading, and I'm doing it all on the instrument. And you get that done, and then the fun part starts. Recovery from unusual attitudes. You had to do that every 2 years now, right? Anyway, he makes you put your head down. And he takes the airplane, he puts it in several gyrations, trying to confuse you with your head down. And then they say, okay, you got it. And you have to look up and just by the instruments, get the airplane straightened out, which is kind of simple to do when you think about it. And he says, okay, I guess I did that all right. And he says, contact Midway approach for an instrument approach to Midway. I said, okay, you do that. You make me go on the transponder, give him a code so he, on his radar screen, he sees me and he knows where I'm at. And I'm following along. He's giving me directions, the air traffic controller from Midway approach. And I know where I'm going, and we keep on going. He's telling me, make this turn to such and such a heading, descend to such and such. I'm thinking, we're getting pretty close to Midway. I can see on my map, we're getting pretty close. And after a while, he says, okay, and 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the end number of the plane was, he says, contact Midway tower at 118.7, good day. They always say that, good day, real. I says, 118.7, good day. And I contact, I said, and 1, 2, 3, 4 is with you, whatever. And he said, okay, turn such and such a heading. I can see he's having me, we switched runways in front of 22. We took off 22 right. We're going to land on 31. And he says, you cleared the land. I said, okay. And the check pilot takes off my head. I can see him 3/4 of a mile. And I land the airplane. And so I, taxi up to our spot, tie down the airplane. We're all set, and this guy hasn't told me anything the whole time how I was doing. He just kept telling me the next procedure. So I had asked him, I said, so how did I do? Did I pass? He said, oh, you passed all right, but I'm wondering why you want a commercial. Are you going to try and get on with the airlines? I said, no, I want to fly fighter planes. Oh, are you going to get some T6 time? And I said, yeah, and he asked that because what was happening from the 60s, early 60s, some of these planes, the government had sold to scrappers. They paid maybe a few $100s to the government per plane, and they were going to scrap them and smelt them. Well, if you went up to these guys and offered them $1,000, they would let you have one of these fighter planes. And there were guys who were doing that. And the scrappers didn't care. They were making 50% profit, 100% profit, and they could get rid of an airplane. So guys were buying airplanes that way, and then there's another way that the warplanes came on the market. And I learned this through a friend of mine, like Bill Marin. He bought, from third world countries, they had bought some of our fighter planes in the early 50s, and they were using them for their air forces. A lot of Mustangs, mostly. They were the 2 best planes to come out of that war, the Mustang and the Corsair. And I know people say, the Thunderbolt is better, or the P-38 or the Hellcat is better. No, our military kept 2 planes in the inventory, after 2 fighter planes, after World War II, the Mustang and the Corsair. And those were my favorite. I didn't know at the time anything about it. I just loved those planes. And they are the only ones that's kept in the inventory, and our military used them in Korea. They fought on in Korea. All the other planes went to reserve squadrons or put out to the desert in storage. But they sold some to third world countries, mostly Mustangs, some Corsairs. And these countries, after we had moved up into our 2nd or 3rd generation of jets, they were buying the 1st generation of jets. And so they let the World War II fighters sit off to the side and deteriorate badly. But they were selling them. They weren't supposed to. When they bought these airplanes from our government made them sign a contract that said that when the planes had reached their useful life, they would be scrapped. Well, these dictators, they didn't pay much attention. I didn't do that, hey. The dictators didn't care much about that, and they sold these airplanes, and a buddy who turned out to be a friend of mine, Bill Marin, he bought an Air Force of P-51 Mustangs. He just bought them, and they were not in good shape. But at any rate, it's a different story. But they were coming in and being sold and flown by civilians who had no training in these things. And these are not just ordinary airplanes. They can kill you. If you don't know what you're doing, they're very powerful. And after several guys got killed and were killing innocent bystanders, the FAA said, okay, that's enough of that stuff. From now on, you want to fly a fighter, you need an LOA, a letter of authorization. In order to get a letter of authorization, you had to have a checkout by an FAA check pilot with a T-6. That was the fighter that the military used as a trainer for their fighters. In other words, they taught guys from basic trainers to primary trainers to the T-6, and the guys that didn't wash out moved up to the T-6, and if they didn't wash out on the T-6, then they could move up to fighters. And the washout rate was kind of high. But at any rate, you had to have an LOA in order to fly fighters from then on, in the late 60s. And in order to get the LOA, you had to fly a T-6 and demonstrate. So when this guy asked me if I was going to get some T-6 time, I told him I'm not only going to get some T-6 time, I'm going to buy one and get really good at it before I move up to fighters. He says, who's going to check you out in it? I said, I have to find somebody. He says, well, I got over 8,000 hours in T-6s. I was a World War II fighter instructor in T-6. After the war, he says, I went into the skywriting business. I bought a T-6, took out the rear seat, put it in a smoke alarm tank, and I was skywriting all over the upper Midwest to the East Coast. Milwaukee, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, New York City, up to Boston, down to the Jersey coast, back over to Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and back. And he says, in 1949 and 1950, I had the exclusive contract to skywrite for Munz TV. I watched these guys. I had seen Munz TV at, doing the skywriting. And this was the guy. Small world, huh? I wouldn't want to have to paint it, but anyway, he says, here's my card. You give me a call, I'll give you a good check on the T6. I'll keep that straight back. But before that, I should get to this screen here. When I was a little kid, I used to make fighter planes. I used to make models. Not like now. You get 15 bucks, you get a plastic, and you put them together. They were wood. And you got a wooden model with cut out roughly the shape of the Corsair and the fighter's ones I like. And I saved those airplanes, the Corsair and the fighter, and I didn't know what happened over the years. You lose track. Well, a few years ago, I'm cleaning the back of our walk-in closet, and I'm looking at this one box of what the hell's in here, you know. Open it up, and they're wrapped in newspapers from the 40s. What's this model airplane of mine? I told my kids, these phone calls, I said, you won't believe this. I found a model I made 70 years ago. Oh, you can take a picture of it and show us, So here it is. Now, if you look closely, maybe you can see the wood grain on that wing. I should have sanded that and made it a little bit smoother before I painted, or at least give her another coat of paint to cover up the wood grain. But hey, that was it. You cut it up, you shape it, you glue it, you paint it with brushes, no spray bottle, and you put on the piece of plastic, and there it was. I haven't found the Corsair yet. I know I saved the Corsair too. It was my favorite. But at any rate, before I got the T6, I wanted to be an even better pilot, and I took aerobatic lessons. Now, our club had an aerobatic airplane, which is a Citabri. You know what a Citabri is?
Yeah.
Made by the Champion Aircraft. Okay, they call it the Citabri, which is aerobatic spelled backwards. It's like a Cub type, only it's stressed for aerobatics, and it's a higher horsepower engine. And so I took aerobatics, and I asked the president of the flying club, I said, we got a couple of instructors, don't we, aerobatic instructors? He said, yeah. I said, well, which one's better? Well, he says, one guy I really like, but his students quit on him. They say he's crazy. I said, give me his number. I don't want this guy. So I got the number of the guy. His name is in my logbook. I forget what his name, but he was a strange guy. But he was a very good instructor. We went up, took off from Midway, climbed up 10,000 feet, and he went through these whole procedures. We wanted to do a first aileron roll, simple aileron roll. Pull the stick back, push it over, plane goes around, straighten it out, in 3 seconds you're up back where you're at. So he showed me how to do it, and I did one, and he said, okay, we'll do it the other way, and do it the other way. I said, okay, that's simple. Now we'll do a barrel roll. And a barrel roll, you keep 1 G on the airplane all the way around, as if you're on the inside of a barrel, and you come up at the point where you started, at the same altitude. And I practiced that for a while. You got to be careful so you don't dish out at the bottom. And coming up. Okay, we did that for a while, and then we did it the other way around. And so I was getting the hang of it pretty good. And then we did a slow roll. Now, in a slow roll, you have to imagine a wire going from the prop to the tail. And you're going to rotate the airplane around that axis and not change it at all. Which means that when you're upside down, you have negative G's on you. Now, a G is what you feel now, sitting or standing on 1 G. When you put 2 G, that's 2 times your body weight. If you've been on a tilt-a-whirl or a roller coaster, you know what G's are. You get more of your body weight. So you want to have negative G's when you're rolling on a slow roll. And that was very disorienting. It was the first time I had been negative G's. So he did it, and upside down, going into sensory overload, and he gets back up and he says, okay, now you do it. I said, no, you better do that one more time. So he did it again, and this time I'm watching what he does with the stick. I'm not paying attention to the outside. I'm just doing what he wants. I want to do what he does. Is you pull over 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. Okay, by that time the airplane has done its thing. So that's how I did my first roll, just by looking at the stick. I wasn't paying attention to that. But like anything else, you do something often enough, you get used to it. And so I started getting used to it, and then we did it the other way. And then after that, we started doing loops. But every lesson, I took 8 or 9 lessons from him. Every lesson started out with a review of the other rolls and other aerobatic maneuvers, and we would continue like that. And then from the very first lesson, after every lesson, he would tell me to kill the engine, which is a no-no. The FAA would not condone this, you know. He'd say, shut off the fuel. The first time I tell him, shut off the fuel, you know, he's been up. What do you mean? He says, go ahead, shut off the fuel. Shut off the fuel, prop, engine stops, and the prop is just windmilling. And I knew enough to put it on the best rated descent speed. In order to get an airplane in the standard category, you have to do a lot of tests the manufacturers do. And one of the things is, of course, the stalls for slow speed and that kind of thing. And it has to be in a manual, the flight manual. And a pilot should know all this stuff. And one of the things they want to absolutely know for sure is the best rated descent speed. The speed at which the airplane will travel the furthest with the least loss of altitude. And of course, if you lose an engine, this is important because it gives you 2 things. It gives you time to consider what you're going to do, maybe solve the problem, and number 2, gives you extra time to get to an airport possibly or someplace where you can land. So I get the airplane, I put it on the best rated descent speed. I said, well, what are we doing? He said, well, you never know. He says, first of all, you got a Hobbs meter on this airplane, and you're paying for the time by the Hobbs meter, and the Hobbs meter is activated by oil pressure. So when you start the engine, how meter starts, telling you the time, the hours the engine is run. And every airplane has a Hobbs meter. You always have to know the time on every engine. An airliner's got 2 engines, fine. You got 2 logbooks to show the time, and an airframe log. Logbooks are very important, you know, when it comes to flying, because they need to know the time, because at certain intervals, you need, for certain kinds of flying, you need a certain kind of inspection, or you need to replace certain components, and you need to know what the TBO is, the time between overhauls. A manufacturer will tell you this engine is good for 1,800 hours. Well, when you get close to 1,800 hours, you better know when you're close to it. But at any rate, he says, you got the Hobbs meter here. When you kill the engine, the Hobbs meter stops. He says, you can save for yourself 15–20% by gliding all the way back to Midway. That's cheating a little bit. He said, but most important is, it'll teach you to be comfortable if you ever should lose an engine. And I'm thinking, oh, what are the odds of that happening? Well, I'll tell you, I've lost engines on warbirds. The things that he taught me saved my butt and saved me from bending any metal, you know? So you go through this whole thing. Can you solve the problem? The engine's dead. What caused it? Can you solve the problem? Who are you going to contact? You should always contact somebody. Let them know for 2 things. First of all, they might be able to help you. Secondly, if you crash, at least somebody knows where you're at. They can send emergency equipment. So we went through this all the time while we're gliding back to Midway, slowly losing altitude. And then when we got to pattern altitude, of course, you turn the mags back on, and you turn the fuel back on, and you land. And I could see why he was considered crazy for doing that, but every flight we did that, and I'm telling you, it helped me. I'm glad I had these weird guys that taught me this kind of stuff. It came in handy. So anyway, I finally bought a T6. I did find a T6, and that's the plane that she showed, Bonnie showed. And that's not a fighter, that's a fighter trainer. And I can talk to you about taking this photo. But at any rate, when I got the T6, I called up the FAA guy, whose name was Wally Sedgwick. He became a patient of mine, by the way. And I called him and said, hey, I got a T6, you know. And he says, okay, I'll give you a good checkout. And he did. He gave me a good checkout, taught me how to land it. He taught me, he broke the rules again. We're at Midway Airport, which wasn't very busy at the time, and it was a day when there was a real strong wind, 35 miles an hour out of the southeast, and they were using runway 13 for takeoffs and landings. He says, tell them you want to land on runway 22, which was a direct crosswind, 35 miles an hour. And you could do that, maybe. You couldn't do that at O'Hare. It's too busy. And Midway at one time was busy. But they wouldn't stop you from doing that, because you sure don't want airplanes on different runways, but if there's not much use, they let us go. And he taught me how to land that airplane with a 35 mile an hour crosswind. And we would turn around and we'd runway 4 and learn how to deal with the crosswind. Afterward, then the debrief, I says, you know, the manual says that T6 can't be landed with crosswinds greater than 25 miles an hour. I know, but my system works and it'll help you someday. And he was right. It was right. I mean, I had derelict teachers who wrote the rules and taught me things that were very helpful later on. Anyway, he checked me out on a T6, and I was doing my takeoffs and landings and doing well. And he says, actually, you're okay. He says, unless you want to do aerobatics. I says, no problem. I'm already an aerobatics ace, right? No, I wasn't. It's a lot different doing aerobatics in a 1,500-pound airplane with 125 horse. It is a 6,000-pound airplane with 600 horse. I had to work. The little aerobatic airplane, I'm not a test pilot, so I can't tell you exact measurements. But I know 2-3 pounds of force would get the ailerons moving, and you'd have to work a little bit. Well, the T6, about 4 or 5 pounds. And you know, when you're working, it's hard. So we went through the whole procedure: the slow roll, the aileron roll, the barrel roll, and you're working in a T6, and they made it hard so that it would be easier when you moved into a fighter plane. That's what the whole idea of this airplane was. But I did the aerobatics with him, and I got a little bit better, and I could work on the aerobatics. And he says, now it's getting to be the fall of 1971 there. He says, you want to do some ACM? Air combat maneuvering, which is dogfighting. He said, I'll give you some hints. Oh, okay, I'm listening to this guy. He's a font of information. He said, okay, somebody is behind you. He's on your tail. He's going to shoot you. You want to get away. What are you going to do? Here's one thing you do. You do a lateral scissors movement, a rolling scissors movement. You climb up, and he's going to go like this. And you're going to watch him and see where he's going. Because you lose sight, you lose the fight. And then you come down, and now you're behind him. So he says, but you better know what your enemy's plane is capable of. Because if you go up, and he goes up with you, and now he's keeping an eye on you, who's going to wind up stalling first and going down? You better hope it's not you, because if he stalls first and goes down, now you're on his tail. But if you know that he's got a better plane, then you're better off getting out of that maneuver, go around him some way. I mean, the guy is so good with this stuff. And he says, here's another maneuver. You're flying along, the guy's behind you, and you want to get out of it. You yank the plane up, and the airplane's going along, you rank it up, it starts slowing down. And this guy will pass you. You kick rudder, get down under him, and now you're behind him in his fixed position. I'm telling you, it was unbelievable. But at any rate, I would practice that fall and all of his maneuvers. It was kind of fun doing it. I enjoyed it, you know. And it was time to take the airplane down for annual inspection. In the winter, you normally do that because you're not flying that much. So I got close to the mechanic there at the place where I learned to fly. It was an aircraft dealer, and they were doing maintenance work, and he was the mechanic. And I got close to him, and I said, do you want to help me do the annual inspection? Sure. I mean, here's a guy, like a car dealer, you're dealing with Chevys all day, and a guy with a Maserati pulls in. You don't want to work on that, you know. So he was happy to help with the warplane. And I learned more from him. His name was John Duraska. He's a kid, and he's a Lugan. I married a Lugan. My wife was Lithuanian. We called them Lugans. Can't say that stuff anymore. But it's funny. My son, I taught him all four of the boys to fly, and two of them went in the Air Force, and one of them was on a NATO operation in Europe with Brits and Frenchmen. And I said, Frenchmen. I said, well, when you're in service, we used to call them frogs. He says, we still do, Dad. Every nationality had a nickname. You were a Wop, you were a Kraut, you were a Mick, you were a Polak, you know, a frog. And nobody thought it was bad. It was just a nickname. Well, you can't say that anymore. But at any rate, John Duraska was a Lithuanian guy. And a good guy, and he took me under his wing, and he taught me a few things different from car restoration and working on the airplane. And so I learned a little bit from him, and then the next year I started, oh no, he says, your plane looks good. I was gapping and cleaning the spark plugs and opening up everything for him to look at, and he's got his flashlight, he's looking at all the inspections, he's inspecting the airplane, checking all the instruments and all the bit of gear retraction you have to do on the annual. And at the end, I'm buttoning him up the airplane, and he says, you know, the plane looks good, everything passed. He says, you passed the AD too. I said, there's an AD, an airworthiness directive. Whenever there's problems, the FAA gathers information from the guys who do the annual inspections. If they see a trail of some kind of problem with a certain airplane, they'll put out an airworthiness directive, which means that the guys who are taking care of the airplane have to check for this. And he said, there's an AD on your plane for spark cracks. I said, really? I said, what do you do for that? He said, well, you have to replace the spar, which means replacing the wing. It's a big, expensive thing. He said, oh, we could put a spar strap if you had a problem. You bolt a steel plate across that area of the spar. I said, I don't have any. He said, no. He says, you don't have any crack. I said, what causes that? He says, well, there was a guy in New Jersey who did aerobatics, and he was doing these snap rolls. And snap rolls are really hard on the airframe, and it was causing cracks. He said, you don't do snap rolls, do you? I said, not anymore. So I I got to flying this airplane and going to air shows. I had a low-level aerobatic waiver, which means I could perform the air shows with it. And I met some other guys who were flying, and I met a guy, another guy, my age, who while I was in dental school, he went into the Air Force and graduated tops in his class, number one in his class when he graduated after a year of training. And the Air Force made him an instructor pilot. They wanted this guy to teach others to be like him. He was unbelievable. His name was Dick Henderson. And so I fell in with him, and he had a T6 just like mine. And we used to fly together. And we were flying one time with another guy who was flying course. When you go into an air show, no use everybody flying course. One guy flies course, and everybody else can do aerobatics, fly formation on him or whatever. And I was doing aerobatics off to a side there, and I came out of a roll, and I only had 170 miles an hour, and to do a loop in a T6 you needed 180. But instead of just hauling it off, I just pulled extra G's and said you need 4.5 G's to do a loop in a T6. I just pulled 6 G's just to get it up over the top and back down on the side. As soon as I'm coming down, he says to me, "Lou, you made an L." I go, "What? You made an L. You didn't have the entry speed, did you? You pulled extra G's, huh?" He says, "You made a big L instead of a nice round O." I said, "Yeah, I was just messing around." He knew from a quarter mile away what was going on in my cockpit. That's how good this guy was. He says, "If you're going to do it, you should do it right every time." Good point. Because if you're low and you're doing aerobatics and you do one little thing different, it could be bad. So I learned, you know, it's like they say, an amateur does something until he can do it right. A professional does it until he can't do it wrong. And I tried to be a professional, especially around him. I was flying with him one day, and, you know, air is not homogeneous. There's always currents in the air. You're always going up and down. Most times it's violent. Every once in a while you're in an airliner and the guy says, captain says, "Buckle your seatbelt, it's going to be turbulent." Well, that's because air currents are really moving. But normally they're moving. So if you're flying formation, we used to keep the center hinge on the aileron lined up with the middle Zeus on the cowl. And that was our line of sight. But air being what it is, you know, you're flying like this, and you're always fighting with the stick and the pump, the throttle, trying to stay in that position. So one day I'm flying along with him, and he says, "Lou, move in." I said, "What?" "Move in." He said, "Well, keep the same sight line. Just move in." I said, "Okay." "More." "Okay." "More." "Okay." "More." He must have had a lot of trust in me, you know. So I got to the point where my prop is a couple of feet out, under, and behind his wing. And something amazing happened. It got smooth. We're flying in the same air. There's no more of this stuff. We're flying as one. He said, "What do you think?" I said, "Wow, that's really nice, you know." Now I understood why the Blue Angels, the Navy Blue Angels demonstration team, and the Air Force Thunderbird, why they fly so close. It's just easier. You're flying in the same air. So anyway, we were flying one day coming home from an air show here, and this is, I think, 1974. And he had a little 35mm camera. And he said, "I'm going to take your picture." I said, "Okay." He says, "Move out," because my wing was under his tail, of course, when you're flying that close. He says, "Move out, I want to get your wing in the picture." So I moved out. Now this picture was taken without a telephoto lens, actually further out than we normally flew in tight formation. And I'll tell you, I learned a lot from that guy. I still see him for lunch once in a while. Of course, he's not flying anymore either. He lost his medical. But he's got a T6 and he keeps it in the family. His sons are flying it. And he'll get in the front seat and fly, but he has to have somebody, one of his kids in the back seat. But he's still flying. God love him. You know? Because we always used to kid him, they're going to bury you in that damn airplane. You know? He had it for 50 years now. But it was fun. In the meantime here, about the same time, I'm hearing about a guy back where my flight school was on the north side of the airport, Midway Airport, who's got a P-51 that he's restoring. And I had to see this airplane. So I walk over into the little maintenance room off the side of the main hangar, and there's a P-51 fuselage in a jig over here, and over here is the wing on its leading edge, and two guys working on it. They're restoring this P-51. So I hung around there for a while, and I got to meet the guy. His name was Bill Marin. And I, of course, became friends, warbird lovers. And I would take him in the back seat. We'd go to air shows together, and we went to aviation meetings and stuff like that. Sometimes at Clow. And so we became friends, and he finally got that P-51 finished in the end of 1974. I helped him put the fuselage onto the wing. He had it bolted all together, and still had a long ways to go. And he got the airplane flying in early '75, and he began flying air shows with us. You know? I think I have a picture of his plane. Yeah, that's his Mustang. He flew that airplane, Mustang 7200. Yeah. No, Mustang 1270. And so we flew together, and he got that airplane flying. And these air shows were fun. You show up on a Friday, and that's media day. And whatever town was holding the air show, they had their newspaper and their TV people and their try and promote the air show. They'd take photos of us, interview us, and that kind of thing. And then we would fly the air show Saturday and Sunday we'd fly home right after our act. So these shows were fun because on Friday and Saturday nights, the warbird pods would get together and we'd exchange stories. And Bill used to say, of these bull sessions, the first layer didn't stand a chance. But they were interesting because by then I had had an engine failure in my T6, and what I had learned from that one instructor, I got the airplane back on the ground in one piece. And so you tell stories like that, and you learn from the other guys' mistakes or experiences. And also it was a good way to find sources for parts, because it's hard to get these parts. Anyway, we flew together a lot, and then one night in '74, I guess, '77, in '77, we're at one of these warbird gatherings, and bullshit is flying, and one of the guys was talking about getting this LOA. And he said, that's a bunch of junk. You don't have to fly that T-60. You either got it or you're not. And of course, some of the guys are saying, yeah, well, that's the whole idea, is separate the guys who don't have it before they kill themselves or kill somebody, And it went back and forth. And finally, Bill says, listen, a good T6 pilot can handle a 51. I'm going to have Lou here. He's got a few $100 in it. I'm going to have him fly my airplane. He'll show you guys, Well, we were drinking. I wasn't drinking that much. And I remembered that the next morning. After breakfast, we were going to the briefing for the show, and he says, by the way, last night, was that the bottle talking, or was you serious about me flying the airplane? No, I want you to fly the airplane. He says, show these guys, He says, I'll give you a key to the hangar. So you didn't have to tell me that twice. By then, I had moved out this area and was living on an airstrip. But he had moved his airplane to DuPage County Airport. And the northeast section of DuPage, is there a runway there now? Northeast.
East. Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, see, that was reorganized in the 80s sometime, because that was where he had his airplane in T-hangars. There were T-hangars there.
Right, we had
In the park.
T-hangars.
We were in one of those T-hangars.
The Powers Road hangars.
Yes, and there was a parking lot on the north side, and the T-hangars faced north. And so he says, you get comfortable in the airplane, and I'll check you out. Okay, fine. So that week I went to DuPage, where it was, and I felt, and the thing is, in their divine wisdom, the manufacturers, aircraft manufacturers in the military, decided that planes should be similar, so that if you're comfortable with the layout of a fighter, of a trainer, you can move to a fighter, and from fighter to fighter, they're pretty much the same. I mean, you're sitting there, your feet are on the rudder pedals, you got the stick on the floor, and the throttle is here. The right side, you have your electrical panel, your starter switches and electrical switches and all that, and your circuit breakers. And on the left side, you have your trim They're the same. Elevator trim was a wheel, and aileron trim and rudder trim were wheels also. And you have the mag switch, you got 6 basic flight. They're pretty much the same. It was pretty much the same as a T6. Matter of fact, they were made by North American Aviation, both of them. So if you're comfortable in one, it wasn't a big deal for the other one. So that Friday I said, you know, I'm ready to go. He said, well, we don't have an air show this weekend. I can't make it Saturday, but Sunday I'll pick you up. I said, okay, well, I'll meet you at the airport Sunday and we'll go out for a ride. I said, okay, fine. Well, Saturday, the weather forecast for Sunday wasn't so good. They're calling for mostly clear, but with scattered showers and thunderstorms. We'll see. So it's 7 o'clock Sunday morning. The alarm goes off. My wife just had another kid, and she was still nursing. She had to get up. And I reach over and pull the grate back from the sliding door leading out the balcony and overlooking the airstrip. Rain hitting the window. I said, okay, that's it. We're not flying today. You don't want to fly in bad weather. So I roll over, and pretty soon, for another 40 winks, and pretty soon the phone rings. And it's Bill. He says, you ready to go? And I say, go where? It's raining. He says, no, it's going to be nice today. I'll meet you at the airport at 9 o'clock. I said, okay. Well, you look at a sectional map of the Chicago area, and you can see where his house was in the far southwest suburb, and where we are up here in the far, that's a distance of 90 miles. And on a day when there's scattered showers and thunderstorms, it could very well be nice in one area and raining. I said, okay, fine. So I get out, shower, shave, and go down, get dressed up, go downstairs, and I'm down there with the baby. I'm feeding him, and a couple of the other kids are down there. And she's making breakfast for them. And she says, who was on the phone? I said, it was Bill. He says it's going to be okay to fly. And she looks at the breakfast room sliding door windows, the rain getting in. She looks at me and rolls her eyes. I said, well, we're probably just going to wind up having coffee at the airport restaurant, you know. So I wasn't flying there in that weather, so I had to drive. It was about a 45-minute drive from here to DuPage County Airport on the Burlington Road. You know, go to Burlington, to the Burlington Road down to St. Charles. And so I left about 8:15. I take the chute out of the parachute out of my T6, put it in my car, and I started driving. Well, after I got a fourth of the way there, the rain had stopped. And the further I got, the better the weather started looking. By the time I got to the airport, it was very nice. A few scattered clouds, visibility better than 15 miles. I said, oh, it's going to be good. So I'm in the parking lot. I got my chute. I'm walking, and Bill got there at about the same time. We're walking together, and I could look across the field to the southwest, and I could see about 15, 20 miles away this huge cumulonimbus cloud about 20, 30,000 feet with a wide area of rain underneath. I says, hey, Will, it's going to rain. No, that's going the other way. I should have known, because this guy flew and lived by the seat of his pants, you know. I said, okay, I don't know how he knew it was going the other way, but we get into the hangar, the service door, and he opens up the big bifold door to get the airplane in and out. And we throw our chutes in the plane, and we do a good pre-flight, check everything out, make sure everything is bolted and tight and right, and check the fluid levels. Coolant level, because it's a liquid-cooled engine, and the hydraulic fluid level, the oil level, and check everything. It took a while, and then we finally get it, it's ready to fly. And he goes and gets a pickup truck he kept in the hangar to pull the plane in and out, and I get the tow bar out from under the plane, and I hook it onto the gear, each one, and I take the tow, and he backs the truck up, and I hook it up there. He pulls the airplane out, and I unhook it from the plane. He drives it back in. I get aboard, strap it in my chute, and in the back seat, he comes in, gets in the front seat, and goes through the motions, gets the throttle and everything set right, hits the primer, and hits the starter, turns on the mags, and boom, the engine comes to life, and now we get immediate oil pressure, which you check, of course, to make sure that's good. But it takes a while for the coolant temperature and the oil temperatures to get up to a normal operating range, which is good for the engine. So we have to wait. And while we're waiting, he's getting the ATIS. He turns on 88 Airport Terminal Information Service, which tells you what runway we're using, what the weather is like at the airport, and all that information. So he gets all that, and we wait a while, and the temperatures come up, and so he does his run-up right there. He does his mag check. It's up to 30 inches, manifold pressure, gets on the brakes, of course, and checks his mags, left one working, right one both working, pulls the prop back, exercises the prop, everything is looking good, all the gauges are reading good, he's pointing everything out to me, fine. And so he contacts ground control and says he's ready to go, and he's got the information, the ATIS information. That's your name. There we go. And we get around the corner of the hangar, now we can see to the southwest, and that thunderstorm that was 15, 20 miles away 25 minutes ago is now right at the corner of the field. And I tell him, Will, I get on the intercom, I says, I think it's going to rain, meaning you're not taking off in this crap, are you? And he says, well, we're only going around the patch once or twice, we'll be okay. Now, this is a guy who flew rotted out Mustangs from Nicaragua, 2,000 miles, and crashed 5 of them because they couldn't make it. He hired some guys to help fly these airplanes up. 4 of them over a period of months. 2 of them couldn't fly the planes and crashed 2 of them right there on takeoff. And the other 2 were good pilots. And they made it all the way to 2,000 miles, 1,000 miles to Texas and 1,000 miles back up here. And he contacted me and said, you want to do it again? No freaking way. One guy said, I aged 10 years wondering what was going to fail next on that damn airplane, you know? I mean, they were ready. And he's flying these things out. But that's the kind of guy he was. Anyway, he says he's going to take off. Okay, we get on there. He tells them, contacts the tower, ready to go at runway 28, and we're going to stay in the paddock. Okay. Tower clears him for the pattern work, and he lines up as the tail wheel is locked with this, like the T6, so we have some directional control. And he pushes the throttles forward. And I'm looking, okay, he's got 55 inches of manifold pressure, supercharger's working, 2,700 on the RPM, and I'm looking at this stupid storm right there, and he finally backs off, you know, and the airplane takes off, he up with the gear, trims it for a climb, and the airplane will climb 4,000 feet a minute, but we only need 1,000 feet for alpha, so he has to push the nose over, come back on the bow. And we're about a mile out and doing 150, slowed down, and he turns, left turn to get back to the runway, and boom, we're in this storm. The rain is hitting us, streaming back over the canopy, the airplane is shaking, and he coolly turns for a downwind leg, contacts the tower, says he's ready for landing at 2-8. Tower clears him to land, and he points to me at 150 miles an hour, puts the gear down. Puts the flap, first notch, 10 degrees of flap. And I'm looking at this overcast coming down. I'm wondering who's going to get to the ground first, us or this overcast. Anyway, we're flying along, and the whole airport is dark now because, of course, the cloud, the rain cloud is blocking the sun. You can clearly see the runway lights. And we're going along, and he turns left base to go down, and he points 120 miles an hour, puts the second notch of flaps down, okay, and boom, we're in the overcast. It's down around us, we can't see anything. And then he turns for base to make the landing, from base to final to make the landing, what he thinks is the final, because he can't see the airport. He's telling it's 110 miles, he looks, 110 miles an hour, he puts full down, full flaps, 45 degrees of flaps, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm sitting back there, tighten down the shoulder. We're going to get whacked by the ground coming up pretty soon, you know. So I'm looking down, just like when you're driving your car in the fall. You can always see down better than you can see further forward. So I'm looking down, waiting for the ground to come up. And we break out about 125 feet. We break out of the clouds. And I look, and there's the airport. Well, we're not lined up with the runway. We're lined up with between the runway and the taxiway and the grass area. And this is a critical part of these airplanes. You add too much power, and there's not enough airspeed going over the control surfaces to give you effective control. And what happens is the airplane will yaw and roll to the left. And without enough altitude to recover, you become the first person to arrive at the scene of an accident. And that's how guys get killed. You know, I'm thinking, oh, baby. But he did something with the throttle. He hit the throttle, hit the stick, hit the throttle, hit the stick, and he got the airplane almost over to the runway. And it slowly settles down, and just past the threshold, it touches down and lands with the left main gear on the runway and the right gear in the grass. And I looked down, bing, just in time to see him hit a runway light, knocked over a runway light with his flap. But he got the airplane over to the center line. Amazing. I mean, it was a beautiful piece of airmanship. I thought he was crazy. You know, being courageous is when you know you might get hurt if you do something and you do it anyway. But being stupid is the same thing. This guy, I don't know, why would you get yourself into a situation where you have to use extreme skill to extricate yourself? Just avoid the situation. I learned that in flying. But at any rate, he got the airplane down and settled, and it was a good piece of, he had the skill to do it. And we're slowing down on the runway, and pretty soon the tower guy comes up on frequency and clears us off the runway, onto the taxiway, and all the way back to the northeast ramp, because he knew we weren't going up flying again. And he does that without handing us off to the ground controller, because, after all, tower guy's got nothing else to do. We're the only idiots flying in that way. So we get to the hangar, and we're behind the overhead door, and he goes underneath it and swings the airplane around, so it's half in and half out of the hangar, and we got the overhead door protecting the canopy, and he shuts off the fuel, pulls the throttle and everything back, and turns off the mags, turns off all the switches, the radio, and the prop is slowly winding down. He gets out, moves the seat forward, so I can get out of the back seat. And I get out with my chute, and I tell him, you know, you knocked over a runway light. And he says, just one? Funny guy, you know. So we get up, I throw the chute onto the tail, we look at the damage, it's minor, it could have been a lot worse. And he says, I'll bring it over to Al's place when the weather gets better today. And he says, I'll call you when we go again. The guy who put the airplane together for him, restored it, was still flying, and we're still working on it midway. He says, I'll call you. Okay, so Wednesday I get a phone call in the morning, he knows it's my day off from the office. And he says, well, Al called, said the airplane's ready. You want to go today? And I said, sure. The weather was beautiful. It was a nice day, sunny, clear. And he said, okay, I'll meet you after lunch at 1 o'clock. I'll take off from the office. He said, and, I'll meet you at 1 o'clock at Al's place. I said, okay, fine. So the weather's good. I'm going to fly. I'm not driving from here to Midway. It's an hour and a half drive, at least 3 hour round trip. So I figured I'd just fly there. We had lunch with the family about 12:15. I have the oldest son, helps me, Steve. He helps me get the airplane out, the T6, and he puts the tractor back, and I get in the 6 and we do a pre-flight, and I take off. And I'm flying into Midway, and I was always amazed how in this busy city with all these buildings, you got 1 square mile there, nothing, flat with runways. It's amazing. Surrounded by, at the time it was a Polish neighborhood, homes, block after block, homes, neatly kept, the Polish people really kept. And those Polak kids, I went to school with some of those guys, and they used to brag, there are more Poles in Chicago, with some truth. There's more Poles in Chicago than there were in Warsaw. Anyway, I land there, and we get taxi instructions over to the northwest ramp where he is, and I taxi next to the airplane shut down, and I get out with my chute and I throw it on the ground next to his chute, and we look at the repair. And it was really done well. It was a simple repair, but it was done well. And we pre-flight the airplane, make sure everything was good, because I didn't trust him pre-flighting it. And we're going to get on board. And he said, you want me to go with you today? I said, no, I don't think so. I can take it. I always thought he flew a little too close to the edges of the excitement envelope when he was flying. I said, I'll take the airplane. So I get up on the wing, throw my chute in, get in the front cockpit. He comes up on the wing, helps me strap in. I get the airplane started, and get oil pressure right away, and I'm listening to ATIS, which is the same as I just landed. And temperatures are coming up, and he's talking to me the whole time, giving me hints. I'm thinking I know all this stuff. So I contacted ground control and said, I'm ready to go. Before I was ready to go, but I figured by the time I taxied over the takeoff, everything would be in me. And so I motioned for him to get off of the wing. And he probably thinking about some of those guys that he let his Mustangs to down in Nicaragua and then crashed them. He's probably thinking about those guys. He whacks him in the shoulder and says, he points to my face, just don't put it into some Pollock's picture window. I said, okay, fine, cool. So I danced to take off and go to the run-up ramp and do my run-up, make sure everything's green now, and fine, we're ready to go. So I contacted, switched the radio, and contact the tower, and said, I'm ready to go at 2-2 right we were using. And I wanted straight out the departure, because I wanted to get away from the city and have a little fun. And they cleared me for takeoff, and here I am. My boyhood dream of flying a P-51 Mustang. I get the stick back, lock the tail wheel, make sure the rudder pedal so that it's locked, and I push the throttle forward. 55 inches manifold pressure, I get pushed back into this, and this thing goes roaring down the runway. And before you know it, the stick gets light, and we're ready to go. I pull it back, I trim it forward, and this baby's climbing up 4,000 feet a minute. Unbelievable, the performance of these things, you know. And I got trimmed just right, and everything's looking good. I just take my hands off, and I'm enjoying the ride. It's like a homesick angel. This baby was climbing unbelievable, 150 miles an hour, but climbing. I get to 10,000 feet, and I know there's a speed limit across the country, as you know. There's a speed limit under 10,000 feet, 250 knots, which is around 300 miles an hour. I'll convert knots to miles an hour, so everybody knows. It's around 300 miles an hour. And I know those guys, they were probably watching me, you know, so I wanted to make sure I'm above 10,000 feet, because I'm going to go over 300 miles an hour. So I'm in the airplane, it's all trimmed to straighten down the flight, and moving along at about 250. And it's just so nice. I moved the stick a little bit. You talk about stick forces. It was a few ounces compared to the P6 where you had to use force. A few ounces, and the airplane immediately reacted, and reacted proportionately. You move a little bit, it moves a little bit. It was like it was reading your mind. You move it a lot, it moves a lot. And you hold it, you move back, it moves back. It's unbelievable how quick and how rapid everything happened in that airplane. That's great for a fighter plane. So I'm just enjoying this airplane. I'm pulling it up on one wing, and I'm looking straight down, looking all around the canopy. Of course, you can see all around it. I move it the other way, and look all around, make sure there's no traffic around. And I pull the stick back and do a aileron roll. And in 1 second, I pull the stick back. Because it's all it takes is a second to do a complete roll of an airplane. It's unbelievable. And very light movement of the stick, very light forces. Move it over, move it back, because I didn't time it, but I know the manual says it'll do a 360-degree roll in a second. Really fantastic. So I'm really enjoying this. I'm really getting my job. They're flying this airplane. I have to do a loop. I wanted to do a loop, but he didn't have a G meter in his plane, but I know what 4 or 5 G's feels like. So I pull the stick back, and I'm doing the G's, and I'm going up, and I get it straight forward, and I'm going over on the back. I release the pressure a little bit. I start looking for the horizon. When you start looking for the horizon, you got to start pulling the stick back. You got to pull the same 4 or 5 G's on the way down. You pull them, you get a nice round circle, like you can keep talking. And the airplane it ate up 1,200 feet doing the loop like that. But it was such a marvelous feeling, that airplane. So, you know, you can have fun for a while, but I know he's back there like an expectant father wondering what's going on with this airplane. So I have to head back, and I have to pull back in the throttle because I'm descending. This airplane's going to go over 300 miles an hour easy. So I pull back in the throttle, and I'm heading back to Midway, and listening to ATIS to make sure I got the change the numbers on me. And before I know it, I'm 5 miles out. I have to contact the tower. I contact the tower and tell them Mustang 0700. Yeah, 700 is 5 miles out, landing with the numbers. And they said, okay, report entering the right downwind for only 2-2. They're going to land in the same runway as the rocket. I said, okay. So I'm slowing the airplane down because now I got to get it down to 150 miles an hour, get the gear down, and be at the right spot at the right time of day. I enter the downwind, and I contact the tower, tell them I'm ready to land at 2-2 right, And they said, okay, Mustang, you're number 2 to land behind King Air. It was on a 3-month flight. I can't see him. I'm 2 miles out. He's 5 miles away. I can't see an airplane with the city behind it as a background. I did no contact. So I get the gear down, make sure I got 3 lights, put the flap 10 degrees, slow it down, get it down to 140, and I can see the King Air coming down and landing. So I turn right base, get down slower, put the gear down. I'm doing everything right. I want to make sure that this is a good landing. And then the tower clears me. He sees the King Air is off the runway. And he says, Mustang, clear to land on 22 right. I go, okay. So now I turn on flight. Get myself settled. I'm going to come back on the power. I'm down to 110. I got full flaps down now. Coming down over the fence, 100 miles an hour, 90 over the fence, 85 it stalls about 85. Pull the stick back, ease it down. Nice landing. Turn around and head back, contact ground control, tell them I want to go back to Northwest Ramp. And there's Will. This is a picture. One of the other guys who fly with knew I was going to do that day, and he was there and took a picture of me and Will. And that was on July 27, 1977. I wrote it on the picture. And I'm debriefing. He's telling me, how did it go? And I says, oh, did this, did that, everything was fine. And he's got that motion picture, he's got a camera, movie camera in his hand. He filmed the flight, and he gave me a copy of it, and I put it with my other films, of which I had all put on a DVD here 10, 20 years ago. So all that summer I flew that 51. I was in heaven. And then, of course, the winter comes, and you have to do your annual inspections and all that. And, that spring, he called me up and says, you know, I'm renewing my insurance. You want me to put you on the plane again? And I had thought about this. And I had gotten my thrill with the P-51. Now I wanted to fly a Corsair. I knew Corsair. So I said, no, thanks, Will. I'm going to look for a Corsair. Well, they're hard to come by. They're not that many for sale. So all that summer, I'm looking to buy a Corsair. And I finally found one in a museum that needed a complete restoration, which is good because I wouldn't mind. I'm working with my hands. I'm a dentist. I enjoy that kind of stuff. I could restore that airplane. And so I went up to take a look at it, and it sure looked forlorn. It was in a museum, but it hadn't been moved much, and just dusty, and that was the bad thing. The good thing was it had been in this museum from almost the time it got out of the Navy, and it hadn't been touched. It was a stock airplane, which was good. So I made a deal and bought the Corsair. Now we had to get it home, and this is where guys come in who are very helpful. I had a United Airlines mechanic who was trained. The engine in the Corsair is an R2800, 2,000 horsepower engine. He was Air Force trained in that engine because the Air Force had airplanes, the C-123 for instance, that used that engine. And that's what he was trained on. He says, you know, I could help you with the airplane. I said, yeah, how much? Oh, I'd be happy to do it. And you could pay these guys $40 or $50 an hour. And here he was donating his time. He just wanted to work on the airplane. And so we bought the airplane and got it to my house. And then you can see the kind of bad shape it was in. I took out everything in the cockpit, took off the canopy, took pictures of the instruments, all the instrument panels, and pulled the instruments out one at a time and marked everything so I know everything would go back where the plumbing was, the electrical or the oil connections of the engine. And I sent all the instruments out to be overhauled. Everything had to be overhauled. To make a long story short, I spent a year and a half working on this thing to get it in flying shape. And there we are adjusting the valves on it. He was such a good helper, this guy. The airplane, we did compression checks. I only had 300 hours on it. It's a 1,600-hour engine. And the compression check, you have to have 80 pounds, close to 80 pounds is ideal. But 60 pounds of pressure, if the cylinder will hold 60 pounds, that's good enough. But all of mine were in the high 70s, except cylinder number 14. It was 60s, upper 60s, you know, good enough to fly, but not good enough for me. I wanted everything right. So we took cylinder number 14, took it off, and replaced it with a brand new cylinder. You can get parts. And we spent the day doing that, hooking that cylinder, making sure the piston came out, didn't get damaged, putting a new one on, bolting everything up. And when we got finished, we sat back and looked at it, it was about 3 hours worth of work. He says, number 14 was shiny, all the rest of them were dirty from flying, you know. He says, that looks like a diamond in a goat's butt. But at any rate, God damn, every time I press this thing. When everything was opened up, I had a steam cleaning outfit, a portable steam cleaning outfit come out, and they steam cleaned everything. So when they did every individual cylinder, so they all looked pretty good, like number 14. And all the inspection plates in the airplane, they did everything. I mean, inside the cockpit, they cleaned it all out. And I let it sit there in the hot sun that day. And when I went to get it that night, to put it back in the hangar after it had dried, all the water had drained out of it. I could see a little pile of sand where it was stored in the desert. And steam cleaning had flushed the sand out of the airplane. So anyway, got it back in there, and we did more work on it and got it finished and had it painted in the markings of Ike Kepford, one of the leading aces. And so I flew it like that for a while. It's a nice little airplane. As a matter of fact, I sold it in the mid-'80s. I had it for about 7 or 8 years. I sold it to a guy who was a backer for the Imperial War Museum in London. He bought it, and they had it over there. And now you just hear on Facebook that it's coming back to the States. They sold it, and now it's going back to the States, so I might get to see it again. But at any rate, it was a fun airplane. And I must have been seen at an air show, because I'm painted in the squadron markings of the Skull and Crossbones Squadron. It was a VF-17. It was a World War II fighter squadron, famous squadron. They had a lot of kills in the war. And I got a call in 1983, early, from the current squadron. They were flying F-14 Tomcats at the time. And they said, you know, we saw your airplane, we're having a reunion with the World War II guys, the ones that are left. We'd like to have you bring your airplane, and we'll pay for fuel and hotel accommodations for you and your family, and we'll take care of it. Well, it took about half a heartbeat for me to say I'll be there, you know. So my wife drove out early with the kids in our conversion van, and they spent a couple of days getting out there. And when they were there, I flew in on a Wednesday night. It was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I landed. I did a pass for the World War II guys with the plane, made a low approach. And I landed, and all these grandfatherly types come around the airplane. And they are the World War II guys. Here they are. Old guys now, you know, like us. They took our picture, and I still had my flight suit on. And the guy here, I don't know if this will show up here. Yeah, he's Ike Kepford. He's the guy who flew this airplane, this particular model plane. And this was the skipper, Tom Blackburn. And every one of these guys had a story to tell. I heard stories over the weekend, reminiscing. This is the first time they had been together here. So it was really a great weekend. I remember these stories on the way home, flying over the Appalachians. I'm thinking, I got to write this down, all this stuff, you know, which I did, and wrote an article about it a couple of years later. But anyway, it was fun, and they took us right away. I got my flight suit off. They took us and their wives on a tour of the historic sites, and this was in Virginia Beach. Oceana Naval Air Station near Virginia Beach. And they took us to historical sites in the area. And the next night, we had dinner that night, and then that was Thursday. And Friday, they had planned taking the women shopping, and the guys were going to do a tour on the airstrip there, showing them. And the skipper came up to me and says, you know, we want to do a fly thing tomorrow. Maybe you can want to come with us? And I said, sure. So he said, meet us at 9 o'clock. We'll meet at the operations building, and we'll talk about flying. Well, we had to plan this flight. They wanted to go down to North Carolina, the Wright brothers, King Hawk, the Wright brothers Memorial, and they wanted to memorialize that was the 40th year of their founding in 1943 in World War II to 1983, and the 80th year of flight, 1903, 83. He says, and we're going to fly over the memorial, you know, we'll do a formation pass. I said, okay, but we had to plan this very closely because we couldn't talk to each other in the air. We use VHF, very high radio frequencies in civilian like car, airlines, private pilots, everybody uses VHF. But the military uses UHF, ultra high frequency. They can bounce signals a little further. They have their own thing. Although I hear now that those planes can do both VHF and UHF, I'm not sure. But at the time, we couldn't talk to each other, so we had to have this plan just right. They said, you take off, fly at 5,000 feet, due south, we'll catch up to you. With their onboard radar, they have no problem. We'll catch up to you and we'll lead on the way down there and we'll make passes. And you always stay to the south side, up sun of my plane, so that we have a better shot. When we make a turn, you come back and get on the other side, and that kind of stuff. I said, okay, fine. So I take off and I'm flying 5,000 feet, you know, we briefed to fly 250 miles an hour. I'm flying about 250 and I'm looking at my rear view mirrors. And of course, fighter planes have rear view mirrors because you want to make sure there's nobody behind you. But I'm looking at my rear view mirrors and pretty soon I see two Tomcats back there come up on me. And they come up on my right side and the leader is in the lead and the right, the wingman is in the right wing. And I get on the left wing and there I am flying formation with two Tomcat fighters. Unbelievable. So anyway, we make it past. After we're going a little while, he points to me and he goes, you know, okay, we're going to make our pass. And I get on his right wing, his wingman moves out of the way, I move on his right wing, we make a pass over the Wright Brothers Memorial there. You can see the Atlantic Ocean in the background. Yeah. And we make that one pass and we go out over the ocean and we make a big hairpin turn. Now I got to get on his left side to make a pass going the other way on his south side. And so we did that for a few times. We're out over the ocean here in this shot. And then, after a few times, he points to his helmet, and he points to me, and I got the lead now. I have to fly back to the base. And so I'm flying back, and here they are. They get up on my right wing, both of them, echelon down, the leader and his wingman. And then I see in my rearview mirror, the wingman's moving over to the other side. They're just playing around, and the skipper moves over, and there I am. They're just having fun with this World War II fighter. So we had a good time that weekend. And oh yeah, I remember this. I was there. What time is it getting to me? Is it kind of late?
Yes.
Yeah, could end this
A few more
up.
minutes. Yeah.
Well, there was I flew a jet fighter also, and I got checked out. This is Dick Hendrickson and his this secretary. I don't know why she hung around with us. And I told Dick, hey, I'll give you, take a picture. I showed his wife. I said, hey, see what he's doing down there in Texas? And she says, no, I know it's not him, you know. So at any rate, we flew, got checked out in the T-Bird, and that's the jet I had. It was a fighter that was turned into a trainer. I owned that baby for a couple of years, and I really remember the Jolly Rogers, I painted it on my tail. Oh yeah, my son, we went up doing aerobatics one day. He had his camera with him, he took a picture of himself while we were upside down. Oh yeah, and then I saw that airplane and they wanted me to fly an air show performance with a Jap Zero. We bought this Jap Zero. It was a replica, it wasn't a real Jap Zero. There were only two of those flying in the world. And went with the P-40, and we did an air show act where we attacked each other, and I always lost, of course. I always got shot down. But that was it. After that, I flew regular planes, and so it was fun while it lasted. Any questions?
I've got a question. You always talk about putting your shoes in the plane. Why don't you have your shoes on? Or is that a second gear?
Putting my shoes on the plane.
Parachute. You mean
Parachute.
Parachute.
Always wore a parachute. You know, I had an engine failure one time. I thought about jumping. what happened was we were in an air show once, and they start to show off with a Star Spangled Banner, and they have some jumpers come out of the plane. One guy's got an American flag, and the guy circle around. And I remember one guy, one show, for some reason, went back over the crowd. He like lost control of the parachute or something. He landed on a hangar of the airplane, and the parachute collapsed, and he fell down 30 feet, and he was injured. We heard later on he was pretty seriously injured. So when I lost my engine, I'm thinking it was over the suburbs out here, closely knit, packed homes, and I'm thinking I could jump, I got to shoot, and I'm looking down at all these homes with these pitched roofs. Thinking, hell no, this is not a good idea. So I hung on with the airplane and got it back. So, yeah, we always wore parachutes, just in case. I never wanted to jump out of a perfectly good airplane, but people do that, so. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for coming.